Hello, Adult Sunday School Leader. I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty long video, so buckle up and let's go. What is truth? That's exactly what Pilate asked Jesus in John 18:38, isn't it? Right before Jesus' crucifixion. And that's a question that's been asked throughout the centuries. Of course, we Christians know the answer to that because the Bible tells us. In John 14:6, Jesus said, He is the truth. John 17:17 tells us that God's Word is the truth. And in John 14:16 and 17, the Holy Spirit is called the Spirit of truth. So God is truth, which He reveals through the Son and the Spirit and the Word. And when it comes to the true path to salvation, Jesus said that He was the only way and that no one comes to the Father except through Him. Well, that's great. That's all well and good, and I believe it 100%. But how does that help your unsaved friend at work who puts no stock in the Bible? It would be like a Mormon friend trying to prove to me that Jesus preached in the Americas after His resurrection because the Book of Mormon says so. Well, some people may say, well, Mormon beliefs are his truth, but they aren't my truth. And, I talked about this using this kind of language back in the August 13 Prep Talk of this year when I started off the video by saying there's a phrase that has gathered popularity in the last decade or so that really irks me, and it's my truth. And here's why that bothers me, because truth is something that is factual. It's something that aligns with reality. I would say that my Mormon friend believes it to be true, or he perceives it to be true, but it can't be his truth and my belief be my truth, because logically, two people can't hold polar opposite points of view on a subject and both of them be labeled as truth. You see, the concept of truth has slid from objective to subjective. And I'm going to unpack what that means a little bit more in the last part of this video. But briefly, the concept of truth in contemporary culture has shifted from something outside of a person that they align themselves to a personal belief that's based on one's preferences. In Christian terms, the concept of truth for many has gone from being God-centered to being self-centered. We see the electronic philosophers of the day touting this belief when they post memes on social media that say things like, just follow your heart, do what's right for you. Well, the unit we just finished in Daniel was about personally staying true in a world that's far from God. But in our Christian journey, as we're staying true to God in His Word, we will encounter those with questions about the Christian faith. And some of those are hard questions, like, does it matter which truth I believe? So we're going to address some of those questions in this new unit that we're starting this week. The unit's called Confident in the Face of Hard Questions. This is the first lesson called Does It Really Matter Which Truth I Believe? The focal passage is going to be out of John chapter 3 and John chapter 8. And the point of this lesson is knowing the truth of Christ is the only way we can experience freedom. Well, this doesn't happen very often, but I'm not really comfortable with the way LifeWay material approaches this week's topic. In my mind, they use circular logic by using the Bible to show that Jesus is the truth and that knowing Him is the only way to experience freedom. And as I stated earlier, I 100% believe that, but that doesn't help answer the question to someone who's either unfamiliar with the Bible or puts no stock in it. So what I'm going to do for this lesson is go over the scripture that the lesson material uses and then supplement it with some additional thoughts at the end. And that's why it's going to be a little bit longer video. So we start in John chapter 3, verses 19 through 21. Now, earlier in this chapter, Nicodemus came to Jesus at night. That famous dialogue took place where Jesus told Nicodemus that he must be born again. And following that exchange is John 3:16, probably the most famous, most memorized verse in the Bible. Now, there are no quotation marks like we have in English, so it's not certain where Jesus' talking to Nicodemus stops and John's commentary begins. But verse 19 begins with, this is the judgment, or this is the verdict, meaning that which follows is the grounds for judgment. In that same verse, the statement, the light has come into the world, that's made. And John uses this light and darkness motif throughout his gospel, as well as in his letters, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. In fact, we see that pattern used a lot just in verses 4 and 5 of the first chapter of John's Gospel when he writes this. In him, meaning Jesus, was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So it's obvious here that the light, of course, refers to Jesus. And now for an illustration to help understand these verses better, with the arrival of the light of Jesus into the world, the natural inclination of people is to avoid it, just as cockroaches scurry into hiding when a light's turned on, because sin loves secrecy. When the lives of people are exposed by the light of a holy God, it's uncomfortable, and we don't like it. But when some are introduced to the light of Jesus, they realize that light exposes who they are, and they want to change. They cross over from darkness into light. And as that changed, or we call it saved person, continues in their walk with the Lord, they're no longer repelled by the light of God, but they embrace it. They long to draw closer to it, just like a moth to a porch light. And the closer they get to that light, the brighter that light is, which exposes even more areas that needs to change in a person's life. This process, we've talked about this many times over the last few months, is called sanctification. Our next set of scriptures is John chapter 8, verses 31 through 32. But let's first quickly look at what led up to this. Earlier in John 8, 12 through 30, Jesus had a lengthy conversation with the Pharisees, and they grilled him on who he was and his mission. And Jesus was quite blunt with them, that if they didn't believe in him, they were going to die in their sins. But some of those who were listening believed in him, and that's who Jesus was addressing in these next verses that we're going to look at, 31 and 32 of chapter 8. To those who believed in him, Jesus told them that if they continued in what Jesus taught, then they were truly his disciples. And that holds true for us today. Too many have watered down what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, to the point that it's become a repeat this prayer and you're in. Now, becoming a disciple of Jesus is much more than reciting a specific set of words. The words spoken have to reflect a shift in the heart and a shift in the attitude as well. And I saw this firsthand several years ago when I was on a mission trip to Juarez, the town just across the Mexican border that borders with El Paso. We were going door to door, telling people about Jesus, inviting them to the local church, and as one lady prayed to receive Christ, I happened to open my eyes and look around. And I saw her, she was kind of looking around, just repeating the words without really any sincerity. And it was like she was just going through the motions so she'd get us to move on. And then we look in verse 32, and Jesus makes the famous statement that's been taken out of context so much. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, this phrase has been misused to advance one's agenda. A former Brazilian president used the phrase as his motto in the 2018 presidential election. Johnny Depp tweeted the phrase twice after the verdict against Amber Heard was in his favor. The phrase in Latin is the motto of the University of Tennessee. It was also inscribed on the original headquarters building of the CIA. When one thinks of truth as a political or an intellectual statement, they're thinking of truth as a concept. Instead, the phrase that's used here, it's a spiritual declaration that truth is actually a person. To those who believe in Jesus and follow him, they will know him, and he will set them free. And that's further explained in our last set of verses in John 8, 33 through 36. And here the conversation continued by their replying to Jesus that they had never been slaves to anyone. They were disregarding their own history, which was recorded in their own sacred text. What about those 400 years spent in Egypt making bricks? Did that mean anything? Did they forget about that? They claimed that they were descendants, sons of Abraham. And as Tony Evans writes, he said they were basing their spiritual status on their physical link to Abraham. Well, but as usual, Jesus was talking on a spiritual level while his listeners were thinking he was speaking physically. Jesus continued in verse 34 by saying that everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now, we know that Romans 3:23 tells us that all have sinned. So everyone is a slave to sin. You know what? That's bad news. But the good news is in verse 36. If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And I think of verse 35 like this. But until the Son sets a person free, they're a slave to sin. Meaning they have to sin because it's their nature and their choice. And this gets back to them loving the deeds of darkness and avoiding the light, like a cockroach. Now, they may enjoy an occasional blessing of God's favor throughout their life, but they will not enjoy everlasting favor. To do that, one has to become one of his spiritual children, being set free by the Son. Being a physical descendant of Abraham is not enough. And I really like what Tony Evans says about this passage. He says, for true freedom, we need the living Word and the written Word. The living Word, Jesus, provides us with legal freedom from sin through his atoning death on the cross. Thus, we no longer stand condemned before God, but we must continue in his written Word in Scripture in order to enjoy the freedom from the sin which we can be enslaved in our daily lives. So here are some of the takeaways from this week's Scripture verses. Jesus is the truth. Knowing the truth, knowing Jesus, will set you free from the consequences of sin. And growing in your faith will help you avoid the power of sin. But like I stated earlier, using this lesson as a basis to answer a hard question asked by an agnostic colleague at work, it just won't work. Using the Bible to prove the Bible, what it says, to prove that the Bible is true, that's this circular logic, and they're not going to accept that. Instead, here's how I would approach it. Now, first, I would state that belief does not create fact. Okay? No matter how hard I try, believing something to be true does not make it so. For centuries, it was sincerely believed that the earth was flat, but it wasn't true. The fact is that the earth is round, and I can believe otherwise, but it's not my truth. It's my opinion or my belief. It's the way I see things. So, truth is not what you believe to be true or feel to be true. Truth is based on fact. That goes for science as well as spiritual beliefs. Now, I'm a Christian, and the basis for my beliefs come from the Bible. If I believe my religion to be true, if I believe Christianity to be true, then the book my religion's based on, it's got to be true. So what makes me think that the Bible's true? And that takes me to my next point, that the Bible is a trustworthy document. Now, I don't have time to go into a full apologetic lecture on why the Bible is true. There are several books written on the subject, but I'm just going to give a brief, hopefully brief, outline here. So if you'd like the full notes on this, on what I'm talking about here, just shoot me an email. I'll be glad to send that to you. I did this on a Wednesday night back in the spring of this year about why we believe the Bible is true. Well, the Bible, it's unique. It's unique in its continuity. It was written over a period of 1,600 years by about 40 different authors from all different walks of life in different places on 3 continents, in 3 languages. Yet there's this harmony and continuity throughout. It's also unique in its translation, its circulation, and survival. It's the most translated book in the world with billions of copies produced. It has survived over time and through persecution as well. It's also unique in its teaching. The Bible is a book of prophecy, a book of history, and a book of ethics, just to name a few. No other book provides so many explicit prophecies about events that were so distant in the future, which actually came to pass. So that's great. It's a unique document, but is it reliable? Well, that's the next point. We have thousands of manuscripts, from scraps to entire books, copied and recopied over the centuries. For example, we have over 24,000 manuscript copies or portions of the New Testament. No other document in antiquity even begins to approach such numbers. But are the copies accurate? Well, let's think about some other literature in antiquity. Homer's Iliad, for example. There are in that work there are 764 lines that are in question, just based on the copies and the copies of copies over the time. In the New Testament, there are only 40 lines that are in question. And any variations that we find in the New Testament manuscripts are minimal. and they don't alter the meaning at all. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered beginning around 1946, before then, the earliest Old Testament manuscript we had was around the year AD 900, of Old Testament manuscript, AD 900. One of the Dead Sea Scrolls was the complete book of Isaiah, which dated to about 125 BC, 1,000 years earlier than the previous manuscript. And it was almost exactly the same as the AD 900 manuscript. The few variations were a matter of spelling. For example, in English, the word favor versus favor, okay? And there might be a word like and that connected two thoughts that was maybe in this one but not that one. Just those minor things. And because it was God's word, the Jewish scribes who copied the Bible were meticulous. After a page was copied, it was proofed by another scribe, and if there were any copying errors on that page was burned. So this is another reason for the accuracy of the copies being transmitted throughout the centuries. Now let's think about the external evidence of the Bible. Do other historical documents and archaeological findings confirm or deny the reliability of the Bible? Well, we just finished studying the book of Daniel. For years, critics dismissed that book because there was no evidence that a king named Belshazzar ruled in Babylon during that time. However, later archaeological research confirmed that the reigning monarch Nabonidus appointed Belshazzar as his co-regent while he was away from Babylon. There may be people, events, places mentioned in the Bible that aren't cited in history books, but archaeological findings have always confirmed, never disproved the Bible. Another point about the reliability of the Bible is the fulfilled prophecy that I talked about earlier. For example, there are 60 major prophecies concerning the Messiah. The odds of one man in all of history fulfilling even just eight of those 60 major prophecies is 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Okay, that's 1 in 1 with 17 zeros after it. If you had that many silver dollars, okay, if you had that many silver dollars, 1 times 10 to the 17th power, and you stacked them up, that would be enough to cover the face of the entire state of Texas 2 feet deep. Okay? Who in their right mind would suppose that somebody who is blindfolded would maybe start off in Dallas, walk in any direction for as long as they wanted to, and be able to, on their first attempt, to pick up one specifically marked silver dollar? One out of those 1 times 10 to the 17th power. It just blows the mind. That's just 8 of those 40 prophecies. These facts, and so many more that I didn't get into, prove, at least to me, that the Bible is a true, reliable document. But I've heard it said this, that biblical truth is not ice cream. What do you mean by that? Well, I heard this in a sermon years ago by Greg Kokel from his Stand to Reason radio broadcast that made this seemingly crazy statement that truth is not ice cream. Here's how he explained it. Now, I believe, this is Jim here, I believe Bluebell's butter pecan ice cream is delicious. In fact, I believe it's one of the best ice creams that there is. Now, do you agree or disagree with that? Well, I'm sure there's some of you who disagree with that, so we can say that the statement, Bluebell butter pecan ice cream is delicious, that statement can be both true and false at the same time, because the emphasis is not on the object. It's not on the ice cream, but it's on the subject. It's on me. It's on I. I believe it's delicious. So, with that statement, Bluebell's butter pecan ice cream is delicious, is true for me. But it may not be true for you because it is subjective. It's a subjective truth, meaning that it is true for the subject, for me. However, if I were to say, I believe Bluebell's butter pecan ice cream is a medicine that can cure diabetes, I hope you would disagree with me on that. But if I really believe that to be true, then what are we going to do? We're going to look at evidence. We're going to look at evidence and come up to some conclusion. This type of statement, it's either true or false. It's either true or not true. It's not a preference. It's not a taste issue. It's not a subjective issue, because the claim isn't on me, the subject, but it's on the object, ice cream. This is what's called an objective truth. Because of the Bible's reliability that I mentioned earlier, I believe that biblical truth is an objective truth, it's the standard by which we're to live by. And in the Bible, Jesus said that he was the truth. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what the Bible says about this. That's how I would transition the conversation. That's a lot, isn't it? Hopefully you're not watching this on Sunday morning right before you're going to teach. That's a lot to take in. But anyway, that's enough for this week. I really appreciate you guys. Now, next week, we're going to be looking at the subject of, are miracles relevant? We're going to be looking at John chapter 10 and 14. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your emails and your YouTube comments. Don't forget, pray for and with your class.